Okay, it has given, I think it's given us the warning. Okay, so good morning, the people on this side of the oceans, and good morning, the people, good afternoon, good evening, the people back home. Our conversation today is about Shalom. I think when we started, we said um, how to talk to adults. I couldn't remember how to put that on a flyer, hence the flyer looks funky like that. But it's about having conversations with adults because we had conversations with adolescents a few weeks back, and this is the talk we're going to have today. So as usual, Saya will start it off, and then we will continue from there. So Saya, you're up.
So good morning, good evening, good your time zone, wherever you are. Whenever I get into an Uber, it's for me, an Uber ride or a Bolt ride, a shared ride is it's usually a nice time to have a snapshot into a place's culture, whether it's a town, a city, a new country. You get to know about it. One thing I have noticed, however, across different countries and different continents is where in older times, when you used to take a taxi, when it was still a taxi, taxis were places for conversation. You'd get in and the chatty taxi driver would give you a lay of the land and you'd go back forth on the politics of the day. And there's something about conversing that came easily and naturally. But I increasingly notice that when I get into Ubers or Bolt or modern sharing rides, the first question I'm greeted with is, what music would you like to play? What station would you like me to have? And it's worried me that regardless of the society I've gone to, there seems to be a dying art of conversation and a dying art of dialogue. It's made worse that I work with very young people. I work with people in their teens and early 20s. And it's also struck me that when I'm around them, beginning a conversation, just a normal hi, how are you doing, is nerve-wracking for many of them. And this is in college settings. Individuals would sit right next to each other and chat with each other or chat with complete strangers. I take the bus to work every morning, and almost like clockwork, I see individuals sit, flip out their phones, have their headsets on, and for an entire 15, 12, 20-minute ride, individuals would not know the person right next to them. The spillover is noticed every time I see an individual walking into my office for interviewing, coaching, and they cannot maintain eye contact. They cannot handle strong conversations. They are a bundle of nerves. And I'm just thinking something is a bit off in the society that we are living in now, that we have lost that ability to converse, that ability to begin from complete strangers to meaningful and deep conversations. And it's made worse when the conversation that needs to happen is a challenging one or a difficult one. And I don't mean correcting an individual. I mean something as important as negotiating your way through an interview to a job or a pay raise, or trying to push back on a point you disagree with while trying to maintain the friendship. Because we are increasingly eroding our ability to these conversations as adults. Individuals will either recluse or they will go to the anonymity of screens, and suddenly these shy individuals who could neither express themselves nor initiate a conversation become tigers, and behind the screen of an Instagram chat or an X post or a Facebook rant. And this is not the way it should be, because the end result is we are talking past each other, we are talking over each other, we are framing opinions as though they were fact, and we are seeking that we need to be approved on the same. What's a net result? It was in dialogues that new ideas were birthed and old ideas were refreshed, and there was the cross fertilization of ideas to birth even stronger ideas. It was in dialogue that bad ideas were challenged and new frontiers were pushed, new alliances were forged, and new possibilities were created. And when we lose that ability to dialogue, we're not just losing out on interview spaces or potential spouses or pay raises. We are actually harming the way we form, maintain, grow, and refresh our culture. We therefore need to have this serious, authentic conversation, not just to bring back conversations in Uber rides and taxis, but to be able to rediscover what it is to have conversations, be they simple, be hard. We need to have adult conversations. It's time to have this authentic dialogue. Back to you in studio.
Thank you, Saya. So, because my mind wanders, two things. When we joined first year of school, we were being shifted from the 6 years of school to 5 years. You can tell what course I did, to 5 years of school, but they were extending the number of weeks we were going to stay in school. As a result, they needed to drop off some courses. And for our lot of med school, we didn't do common courses. So there's no communication skills at all taught to the lot that joined school that year. I'm not saying how far back that was. And for many years, I think they've reverted back to the 6 years because we actually complained in our first year that it was too much. As a result, when I was being employed in private sector after I left government work, the first week of orientation, we were taught how to talk to people, because I think they had noticed that this was a tact and an act that the people in healthcare had not been taught to do. My first question to Syria and Shalom, two S's, and Saya, I need to get an S name, is what is the situation on the ground? Saya has laid to us that we are losing the art of conversation. What is the true situation on the ground? Do people need to be taught how to talk?
Hi, Posa. Hi, everybody. Oh my goodness. Yes, people need to learn how to speak. It is a dire situation. It's very telling which school system you've gone to. It's very telling whether you crammed or not. At least that's in Kenya on the ground from a HR perspective, from sitting in interviews, connecting with people, even coaching. And I'm a Toastmaster, so I know the situation is dire. People cannot speak to each other in conversation. I was in a session just last week and I asked people, what do you do when you get into the lift with your CEO? If they have an elevator pitch, if they can even say hi. And one young man told me, I revert to my phone. Like a call came in or I'm on some social media app. So it is a situation that needs to be handled. Or at least we need to do something about the ability to speak to each other, the ability to converse with each other and chit chat, and even if it's small talk. So yes, I totally agree. The situation is dire.
Hey, Shalom, Ebu, give us good news at least.
Sorry. I will not even give you good news because I think I'll probably make my news worse. Syria is talking about being in an elevator with your CEO. A 16-year-old does not know what to say to their girlfriend. They advance in terms of sexual experimentation with each other before they have learned how to even talk to each other. And so one of the questions I get asked is, you mean when I suggest, could you at least date them? Could you at least date your girlfriend or go on a date with your boyfriend? They ask, you mean as in date, as in go out? And then what do we talk about? Like, why should I go out? Because what are we going to do when we go out, right? Why not just Netflix and chill or whatever it might be? Because at least there's some action there. But why are we going out? Can we club? Yes. Why? Because there we can dance, we can drink, we don't have to talk. So not only is the situation dire on the ground, it is dire underground, as in we are messing up with the roots of it all. So sorry, I don't have good news when it comes to how we are doing on communication.
So when did the rain start beating us?
I think when I'll talk on the Africa side of things, the cultural thing where we said, you're here to be seen and not to be heard. The minute that became that thing of that's how it happens in school, that's what happens at home, that's what happens in offices. You're here to be seen, not to be heard. You're not paid to think, you're paid to do what you're told. The voice stopped mattering a while back, I think. And then what happened is, as I grew, let's say I was told that as I grew, it became the way to do things. So then I expect it of the younger generation. And then, like Syria brings up, when social media comes in, it has given the current generation somewhere to run away to, even when they want to say something.
Syria, when did the rain start beating us?
Oh, I agree with Shalom. A long, long time ago. I think the fact that, yes, children were to be seen and not heard. And then our education system, whoever brought it in, whichever way it is planned for, it's all about being told what to do, not being told how to speak or how to enable yourself to do what you need to do through speech or through speaking. It's, I think I would say, was planted a long time ago. And we are seeing the outcomes now, both with, for example, my generation, the one that came before me is worse. And the one that follows, or the ones that follow us, what has been added onto that is the complication of social media, where I can say whatever I want. I can bet you the people who go screaming on Kenyans on Twitter, having a one-on-one conversation will be a very different situation, right? You can go in and say and scream because no one is seeing your face, because you don't have to stand in front of people or to converse with people, even if it's one-on-one. So it's like a domino effect. It started a while back, and with each generation, the dominoes keep falling and falling and falling. So where we are at now is something needs to give. In school, there's nothing like, oh, speech classes or communication classes. At least I know, hey, and kudos to Loreto schools, because I remember as a child, we had speech classes where you're not only taught how to speak, but how to converse. And we're very, very young. I think it ended when I was in class 3 or something like that. But you see, it sets a foundation for how you're going to even express yourself. So that's the other thing. People don't know how to express themselves. So it started a really, really long time ago.
Okay, then let's turn the tide. Let's okay, we've all agreed it's a problem. And let's say you want to, I've seen your finger. It looks like Obelix's finger.
Oink.
Yes, go ahead.
A few other places that the rain began beating us was what we currently call the cancel culture, but which has its roots in the whole idea of disallowing certain voices. It's very confusing, especially for the young generation. They don't know what they are battling with certain questions and with certain thoughts. They are caught in a world where we were raised in a world that the Judeo-Christian values, for instance, were seen as valid and seen as important. And transitions have happened in between where things that my generation, my father's generation, my mother's generation took us for granted are actually seen as bigotry. And the generation after us are having a problem because when they are at the critical stage of forming their view and the outlook of the world, they're caught in quite an amount of tension. There's a tension between their grandfather's world, their father's world and the world they're living. And there is not enough space and not enough room for them to process the conflicting ideas or to drill down or to question through everything. And so the safe space where many of them end up going is retreating backwards because they don't want to be seen as a bit off or seen as bigots and they are genuinely processing these sorts of confusions and insecurities and fears. And I've seen this on both sides of the pond now that I have worked in both sides. The other place that genuinely the rain began beating us is, we may not admit it, but the world is going through the biggest clinical trial without a definite end date, and that is our dalliance with screens. There's been no previous generation where we did a clinical trial on the effect of screens, and then we're able to roll it out. Ours is a generation where we are learning on the go. And for the first time in human history, all of human history, there is an interface between human beings in their conversation. Previously, the closest interface that came was a letter or an edict or stuff. But now we genuinely are replacing the human-to-human contact with a mediator, and there's a lot of investment that's been done in the mediation interface to try and make it as human-like, as close to human touch. And it's something there's no previous generation that has had the opportunity to learn and grow and live with it and be able to hold the hand and guide. We don't know. And right now, from cradle to crash to grave, the individuals who have to interface with the screen, and we're just learning. It's a live, ongoing kind of thing. That the screen has affected our capacity to communicate is not questioned. It is not in doubt. It's there to see. So I think convergence of those two, especially on the younger generation, the wider effects of the cancel culture and the ongoing clinical trial on the use of screens, is affecting their capability to communicate effectively.
Okay, my God, no one has good news. Okay, so let's stem the tide. We've been given all the money in this. Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, everyone has combined to give us money to turn this tide. So what are the steps we will take to be able to communicate effectively? Sylvia, because you're our Toastmasters person, you can start us off.
What do we need to do? We need to put all the gadgets down. We need to be present. If I am going in for, let me even just say a date, I'm meeting people for the first time. My escape route is my phone. So the moment I hold my phone in my hand, people will think I'm busy. I'm either on the call, or I'm checking an email or whatever. So I think first things first is to put the gadgets away when you're in the room with people, because the moment I, as a person, even wanting to approach you, see that you are busy, you have no time for me. So being on your gadget, on your laptop, on whatever digital device you have, shows me that you do not have time for me. So if we're going to engage, it's as simple as, you come to my desk, if I'm the boss, I will put my phone down, I will close my laptop so that we can engage. And if I don't know how, then start by asking questions. Get to know people. And I know people are different. So you'll have your extroverted people who are very ready, very eager. And in my world of strength, it's called having the strength of woo. So you're able to reach out. You're excited about going to meet people and to get to know people. But in general, I would say, let's go back to the human touch. Let's go back to connecting with each other, to really wanting and being intentional about getting to know people. And I would suggest that we have those meetings with ourselves first, because if I don't know myself, then I don't know what I'm going to tell you, that I'm going through, I am not enough moments and imposter syndrome. So Also the aspect of just getting to know who you are to be able to express and to connect with people genuinely, authentically, is a good place to start.
Okay. Shalom, where do we start?
I think it's more like, where do we continue? Because I think in this day and age, I'd agree the first thing to do is just put that gadget aside. There's a book I love called You Can't Text a Tough Conversation. Basically, when you need to have real conversations, they need to be had face to face. We are having mental health issues coming as a result of people being dumped, divorced, and all those other things on phone, without actually meeting somebody, eyeballing somebody. But another thing that we can do is listen to ourselves. Like what Syria is bringing up about, do we even know ourselves? But how many of us are actually comfortable sitting and listening to our own inner voices? How will we even know how to listen to other people? Because if I put the gadget down and my mind is still running in other places, it doesn't help. I think the skill of listening, the art of listening, needs to be taught also. And I think it will be taught in how we speak to each other, the things that we demand of each other, like listen to me, not speaking, role plays in different places, practicing it in the office, talks like these ones that you're hosting, Posa. We need to talk about, how do you actually listen? Do I listen to you waiting to give an answer, or do I listen to you just to listen to you? Some of the parenting exercises I give is to ask parents to go out and ask children questions about how they're doing, but do not give them an answer. And so many children end up behaving as though, they're so unsure of themselves that they ask questions instead of saying, this is what I want to do. So when they ask the question, don't answer, pose it back to them and really listen to what they have to say, because then that's the way we'll teach the younger generation how to listen to themselves. You know how sometimes you can have an argument with somebody and then say, can you hear what you're saying? Can you or it says, can you hear what you're saying? We don't even know how to hear ourselves. We speak more than listen. So I think another thing to add on is to actually teach the art of listening.
Sorry, I have teenagers and they're making eggs. I'm just wondering, then that means we have to start early. Are we borrowing from the Loreto siblings and starting to teach how to speak, to enunciate early from elementary school, or what does that look like?
I think for me, what it looks like is in premarital counseling sessions, talk about communication and give them role play. Don't just teach communication as a theory, right? When it comes to all these marriage retreats that people are doing, let us have the conversation. Are you listening to each other? Those of us who are therapists and you're sitting with people in conflict, can we talk about the listening? So it's not just starting from the bottom, because we can't start from the bottom and leave the top untouched, because the top is corrupting the bottom, isn't it? It's the one that's not passing on the skill. So I think everybody across the lifespan needs to be having these conversations in whichever way. So yes, those who are in school, by all means, let's do the Loreto thing. And I like, Syria, you actually said you were taught to speak and to converse, because there's a difference between the two. If we put people in debate clubs, for instance, we are not teaching them how to communicate. We are teaching them how to debate. We are not teaching them how to listen without listening for an answer. We are teaching them to listen for an answer. So when people say, oh, we have speaking clubs in our school, we have debate club, we have MUN, we have all those things going on. Yeah, yes, you do. It's building confidence on a stage. It's not building listening skills. It's not building conflict resolution skills. And I think communication with adults in the adult space and right across life is about resolving conflict. If we disagree on something, are we able to have that conversation without, quote unquote, killing each other or hating each other or breaking that relationship? I think even when you're talking about it in the fly, you were talking about the breakdown in communication that's messing up relationships. Are we able to handle conflict? What are all those things that constitute good communication? Now, if you're grown-ups, let's deal with it at the grown-up space. Syria is in HR during the interview space. I think correcting it would look like in the place where you're interviewing somebody, and this is my opinion, in the place where you're interviewing somebody and you see they have a shortcoming as far as communication is concerned, if they're good contenders for a job, can they have a mini boot camp that can onboarding also include communication? Can they have a mini boot camp that helps teach some of these conversational skills? Yeah.
Oh, I love that you
Shoot.
say that about onboarding and HR. I happened to have found myself in IT interviews. So I remember the first one that I did, the candidate that they picked was the one who spoke the least, but knew his stuff. So from a HR perspective, and that was many years ago, I was like, what? How can you pick someone who does not know how to express themselves and how to speak? And they told me, no, that's not important in IT. What we want is the skill. He's not going to be talking to anybody. He's going to be right in the middle of technology and hardware and all those things. So I had to bring a balance as to how the interviews are done, teach the other HR people that look for IT. If someone is not really able to express themselves, it's okay. So long as you figure that they can do the work. But then in hindsight now, I'm like, it is important because this IT person will go for meetings. This IT person will engage with other colleagues. So either it is a function of fear to express yourself, of not having the right words. And in the space of speech versus conversation, it is quite different because I can be very eloquent, but I'm not able to have to communicate what it is I want to say. So I know how to pronounce and I know all the right words. I might even have a really lovely accent. But for the life of me, I cannot hold a conversation with somebody. I cannot even take time to listen. So I end up over talking or under talking. I'm not able to express what it is I want to say. And in my space, sometimes I find that when I meet someone who has communication strengths like I do, when we are not listened to, as you talk about listening, what will happen is my voice will increase. So I'll end up shouting. And it happened when my child was young. And that is where I started to learn how to listen, to have to pause and really listen to what the other person is saying and really listen without the noise in my head. So that's another thing that we have to think about. We have so much noise. When people start speaking, you're either thinking, okay, that's not my opinion. You start having conversations in your head about what I will say next or how I will respond, rather than listening and assimilating what is being said. Do I understand? And in some of the sessions that I have when I'm training communication skills, I don't know if you guys remember Broken Telephone. And it is the most hilarious thing because you realize people hear their own things. So you are communicating one thing or you're trying to communicate one thing, but what I receive, what I decode from your message is completely different. So it's really important to note that I have to be aware, or we as individuals have to be aware of what you're trying to communicate and to confirm that the person on the other end has understood exactly what you say. And that, of course, there are different tools and ways to do that. But yeah, I think it's really important that we factor quite a number of things in terms of communicating and conversing with each other.
So I know we've touched on two entry points for adults who've missed the Loreto nuance classes, no enunciation classes. We've talked of boot camps by HR, and we've talked of premarital counseling. There are other spaces that we tend to meet adults, and that's universities, in churches and all that. How are we equipping the trainers of trainers to teach communication skills to these people?
Is Um, so there are different ways that this are being done. Now, in the university proper, it's less because the places where people have to, unless you're doing group work or the way professors run their show and shop, not too much is done there in as far as communicating is concerned beyond group work and class presentation and maybe the class interaction. But even those are not being done from a point of, hey, I am training you to communicate. They're being done probably with the assumption that, hey, you're coming with a background that you're already good at conversing. We're just doing this for the advance of science or law or medicine or biology, whatever it is that you're studying in that space. So for the school, the places within universities where a lot more is done is either in the clubs, when students come in the clubs is a lot more, at least I can speak for the universities I have worked for, is a lot more is done in terms of building the leaders who then are expected, the club leaders who are then expected to go back and empower their colleagues in doing that. However, still, the same wider problems happen. We're still using technology, we're still texting, we're still using all these other impersonal things, and the events that bring us together are less and less likely to increase. There's hope because in career centers, we do a lot of preparing people for their elevator pitch or to speak to an employer or to prepare for interviews. So those are hopeful spaces within the university. Surprisingly, I think churches are way better placed in building the conversation skills. So in things like leading Bible study groups, that's a very important. A Bible study group is an excellent place to learn how to communicate. Because the leader is trained in the content and in facilitation, which is a very good place to have a conversation. And reason being, people enter a Bible study with different levels of understanding the Bible, different levels, different viewpoints. And what the leader or that group is meant to do is have the discussion and listen to each other. So any congregation that does that kind of thing is very, very helpful. And then secondly, why churches are becoming an increasingly better place for this is especially in churches where they do cross-cultural groups, and by cultural here, I'm using more of age groups. It's not just youth are in one corner and adults in another and children in another. But there is time when these various groups come together, whether it's in a breakout session or in a retreat or stuff, and they're able to speak to different cultures, whether it's the men's group or the ladies group or the young adults group that is speaking to each other, really helps with that. A third space where churches and religious organizations, especially, I can speak more of the Christian faith, are helpful in equipping individuals that way are when young people are, for instance, given the chance to lead retreats and organize stuff like that, they have to begin building those skills. All that I have said that is positive there is jeopardized in churches that are top heavy, where it is you only see it, listen to stuff that is spoken to you from the lectern or the dais or the pulpit, and the only time you ever converse with each other is when you're told, turn to your neighbor and do XYZ. That doesn't help. So if either A, your involvement in church is reduced to that, or B, the way the church is structured is more received from the guy at the front, it does not help build the sort of conversation skills that need to happen. But a well-ordered church can become an extremely useful platform. At least I know from my experience, I learned a lot of my facilitation and speaking and confidence and conversing with individuals right within the precincts of churches' activities. So I don't know if that answers your question, Paul.
Yes, it does. I'm curious because we are from the Adventist background. I'm curious to hear from the other spaces, Syria and Shalom, and if they are the same question, which other? Because I know we have entry point of HR boot camps and premarital counseling. Which other spaces can we teach adults to have a conversation, proper conversations if they miss the boat? We are calling it the Loreto boat for now, of learning how to have a conversation.
Well, this is where I bring in Toastmasters, and
Yes, you do.
I
Yeah.
can say in East Africa, we're about 89 clubs, and it is a place not only where we help people to get over their fear of public speaking or glossophobia, but we learn how to listen. We really do learn how to listen, because the structure in our meetings, the learning material that you get to just help you know even how to frame your thoughts. Because there are times where you react. Many times you react and you say things that you don't mean, and you end up saying things that you regret. But once you learn and practice, and that's the other thing, Masters gives you a space to practice what it is you're learning. You have an audience to listen to you. You have people giving you feedback. With every speech that you do, you will receive feedback and be told, you could have said this, you could have done this. Even your grammar is checked in terms of, do we say me, I, or do we say we, or so and so and so and myself. So there's a lot of things to be gained from being a Toastmaster, as well as even your leadership. How do you communicate as a leader? Because, say, for example, you are the commanding type and you have no empathetic bone in your body, it will be terrible for the people who report to you. Because I feel that communication in the how we speak to each other. I may really have things that I want to tell you, but how I tell you can make or break me, right? So how I receive that piece of communication based on who I am and how well I know myself can have a serious psychological effect, because I can come and tell you things, or you can come and tell me things that just I feel are so hurtful. And the one thing that I learned in communication is that what I hear and what I feel based off of what you tell me is valid, because it's me who is feeling what I'm feeling based on what you're telling me. So it's really important to consider the how that this communication is taught, because choice of words. I love the quote that says, think before you speak, because then you are able to know, is this hurtful? And maybe I don't even know how to gauge what is hurtful. So it's really important to be able to receive development or to be taught theory as well as the practice. So the practice is so important. So I would say Toastmasters is one place where you can learn a lot of things. And then our schools. We teach English, we teach literature, but we are teaching. Are they practicing? Is another question. You teach people and they take notes and they learn and they pass exams and they cram. And I'm speaking about our Kenyan system. People will cram. They may even speak and pronounce things well, but they are cramming even the English piece, even the conversation piece, English, Swahili, whatever language. So once you have concluded with your cramming and you leave school, then that's it. I no longer need to cram. I no longer need to know. I can speak whichever way I want. So an important space is the education system, because I suppose majority of people will go through that. But once you're an adult and you feel or something is missing, you're not growing in your career and you need a space to learn, Toastmasters, I'd say, is one. We have coaches who do speech and communication or public speaking or whatever. It is important to seek help. So whichever platform you choose to learn, the point is, if you're an adult and you're not able to communicate, it is important to find the place that works for you to learn how to be able to communicate well.
So before Shalom chimes in, because I have been invited to a Toastmasters here, first of all, it was very early in the morning. I could not, my sleep takes precedence. But they're not, Toastmasters is not free. And, you know, I always campaign from my villagers in, this time they're in Shamahoho. My Shamahoho villagers cannot afford to go to have Toastmasters. What are we doing for them? And my other question, the other thing I want to piggyback on is, not piggyback, just to introduce, my Shamahoho villagers are very good at Swahili, which they don't learn in their home state, but they learn through radio. I'm just wondering, Shalom, I think maybe we used to have radio lessons in primary school. I'm just wondering if it's also a means to teach people how to speak, and not these morning breakfast shows that we have, like proper Mwalimu Jero classes that we had in primary schools, and what has made my Shamahoho villagers just say Kwaminajili in like nowhere. They just say Kwaminajili. It's amazing. But just Shalom, go ahead.
Syria was to respond on the payment thing for the Shamahoha people, Toastmasters for Shamahoha.
Yes. So yes, unfortunately, Toastmasters has a fee. So for those who are able, then they will join. But the message is to carry what you learn from there. Carry it to your home, carry it to your office, carry it to your villages. I think it starts with one person. Because if you learn and you do not share, and you do not teach, and you do not pass what you are learning, what impact are you making? So I think where you are a Toastmaster, or where you are somebody who is able to communicate and able to see that somebody else is not able to do it, or is impacting negatively through their communication, then it's up to us to be able to share, to be able to tell them, if you try to say A, B, C, D, or if you stop to listen to what they're saying, perhaps you'd get a different outcome. So I think it is a function of creating impact, because we have a direct impact of 600 people. And so if we impact those 600 people directly, they will impact their 600, and so on and so forth, and we can change the world. It doesn't take many people to do that.
Shalom.
Yeah, yes, the avenues for teaching this particular skill. Yes, there were the radio classes. I don't know whether they're still on. I haven't had children of today talk about having radio lessons. But even books, if we look at the books that were published then versus the books that are published now, dialogue has changed. You just need to look at the Diary of a Wimpy Kid kind of conversations versus the good old conversations of Famous Five once upon a time. And I'm looking at it at the level, that same reading age level. So even the dialogue in books has changed. Therefore, we don't have examples of places. However, those are some of the places where we can start changing, like you say, turning the tide. Change the books, find books that are going to talk about it. When we look at what we are watching, even on screen, there's very little conversation that's leading somewhere. The conversation is very action, staccato type of thing. So that's the way they talk. So when you're in a kindergarten and you're looking at or listening to children talking in a kindergarten, they'd have incomplete sentences. They cannot express themselves properly. They curse before they can compose a proper sentence because of repeating and echoing what is that they're hearing. So I think even the media we are consuming is not going any. The media platforms we are consuming media on are not going anywhere, but the media we consume can change. So I think that's one of the places. Let's create movies, documentaries, whatever it might be, that's going to help children learn how to talk with each other, right? Then things like internships. I think internships need to start a little bit earlier. We wait until campus to start internships when if we started them in Form 3, for instance, and I'm talking about the public school system here, that third form or the second last year of high school, if we started internships at that point, we can get these children into an adult world where conversations are already happening. And that is assuming that in that adult world, there's also something about communication going on, right? Syria says they have 600 people. These 600 people work somewhere. If they can directly impact their office places or their homes or their churches, then we have little Toastmaster type places going on, right? Then what's the point of learning this communication? If we can peg great communication to a result, then it will be easier to get people to dialogue well, right? But right now, if I can take my phone and I'll be okay and I'm hired as an IT guy and not need to talk to anybody, then fine. I got my job. I don't need to learn how to talk on the job. I think we need to connect. In Toastmasters, I've attended one or two. In Toastmasters, when you present something, you're given feedback and you get that result. On media, kids will play a game and they get all these stars and things, that are flowing all over the place. That is direct feedback that they're getting. If we can find a way of putting positive feedback for great communication, I think we shall inspire people to communicate better. This IT guy who was hired, for instance, without needing to converse properly, that was perfect for his job. However, it's not perfect for his human relationships. And yet his human relationships going wrong would actually jeopardize his job. So you have a guy who you have picked because you don't need him to communicate, but his life needs him to communicate. So if we can show them, yes, you've gotten your job, for instance, because of this, you're a procurement guy, you're probably an accountant, the people who don't have front-facing kind of jobs, they still have front-facing interactions with other human beings. So if we can show them how improving your communication skills and your conversation skills will actually help you, then maybe we might get some traction. So let's go to internships. Let's find the place where they are. Let's change the media that's coming at people from books to programs, and we see where we can go from there.
And I think that's a place where the US is a bit ahead. My children who are right now, they're in high school, one is about to finish. They've had internships. People start working at 16 and they work jobs like cashiers at the till, the changing, the ones in Nakumat or whatever supermarket is there, and they're able to start having conversations there and conflict resolution skills. And those jobs are very strict. You cannot go with your phones. So teenagers are forced to reform as a result. I know they'll be zombies for a few minutes, but when they go for their shifts, they are okay. Then the other thing is that there's public radio here is still present. I listen to Minnesota Public Radio, which has programs for everything. And there's something called PBS, which is also a public, it's like the KBC equivalent and has the same, like when my kids were younger, we watched a lot of good programming there. And I think if we were serious, because the public radio here is sponsored by you and I, as in the public. Like there's a week they annoy us by asking for donations. And if KBC had that model, I think they would do better. I just want us to touch on the emotional intelligence and conversation. How do we teach people both in professional spaces and within the home, emotional intelligence that leads to better communication skills? I don't know if any of you is an emotional intelligence practitioner, but I'm so sure this word has made the buzz for many years and you've picked one or two, three things out there.
Oh, yes, it is a sweet spot. And trending, for you to become a leader, you have to be emotionally intelligent. For you to manage people and to lead people, I think for you to be human and be able to engage well with people, you have to learn emotional intelligence because it speaks a lot. And we are emotional beings. And so if we do not know where or how we operate or how we react or have the ability to manage that reaction, because I think that emotional intelligence is all about you hearing something or you being in a situation and have the ability to pause before you react so that you know or you present a calm nature in your response or you present balance in how you respond to people. And so it's really, really critical for people to know themselves because a key function of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. If you do not know yourself, if you do not stop to notice how you react, to think about how my day went and how my conversations went and how I reacted, who did I hurt, who did I speak to badly, how did so and so react to what I said, then we're doing nothing about learning how to be emotionally intelligent. So it's really a function of I need to get to know myself so that I know, because I know so and so triggers me, I need to be able to manage myself in how I respond to them, in how I will become after engaging with person X. So one of the things I do as a strengths coach is I have to know myself really well. And I just happen to have the strength of positivity, hence I'm always smiling on your show, Posa. And then the strength of communication. So what happens is I can really, really be in a fight with one person. So if I've had a fight with Posa and then when I meet Shalom, our conversation will be completely different because I am able to remove myself from the emotion of being in a fight to a happy space where I'm speaking to someone about something completely different. And if I did not stop to figure out what that was, I would have really hurt some people, or I may have. And to a point where before I even knew I had these strengths or this is how I'm wired, I used to think something is wrong with me. Other people will carry a bad engagement or a bad conversation or a fight throughout their day, throughout days and days. And I say this because I know people are different, but for me, I'm able to quickly shift, which has a different psychological effect altogether, because then maybe I'm burying things, but that's being besides the point. In terms of emotional intelligence, I believe it is a function of, first of all, knowing yourself, noticing how you behave, how you react, how you respond to certain situations or to certain people, figure out why, and get help if you need to. And then begin the process of practicing and knowing, okay, so and so will trigger me. I need to be calm. I need to know that I will be triggered. So therefore, what do I do about that trigger? And how do I choose how to behave? So something else that I take people through is self-leadership. And it means you're reacting on purpose. You are faced with so many situations, frustrations, natural triggers, or engagements that trigger you. But in terms of being a self-leader, my knowledge of myself and balancing myself and knowing the situations that will affect me and how to choose joy over my batteries being depleted is really, really critical.
Okay. Shalom, do you want to add anything on EI?
Well, probably just to say that stress management also affects your emotional responses, right? So besides the self-awareness, you need to, of course, the first part is self. You must be emotionally self-aware, as Syria has said. So after that has happened, you need to also add other skills that will help you make the right decision when it comes to reacting or responding to somebody. Because you see, like when Posa is talking, sorry, Syria is one who was talking about having a fight with Posa, having a totally different conversation with Shalom. That can be as a result of emotional intelligence or a lack of, I don't even know what I would call it. Maybe Syria can find a nice communication word for it. But how then do you explain this person who will be horrible to their wife, but great to a girlfriend? Or great in the office, horrible at home, or great at home and horrible at the office, though it's usually not that way. How then do you explain how those people are able to separate their reactions and emotions from one particular engagement to another? I think the difference when it comes to emotional intelligence is that you have thought about it. You're not just reacting out of hate. I feel like with emotional intelligence, it's about response. You're choosing a response. You're not reacting because I'm unhappy with Posa, then I'm unhappy. Because I'm not unhappy with Shalom, then I'll be joyful. You're actually choosing, thinking through and saying, I'm not choosing to bring this baggage into this particular interaction. And I think that will be helped by stress management. Stress management, being flexible, understanding that not everybody thinks and feels like you. Not everybody wants the same communication channel as you do. When you're self-aware, you're going to be able to tell whether you're a verbal person who wants communication through words, a physical person who wants to be touched or given tangible stuff, or you're what is it called? Like more of a visual. You need to see. So show me that you love me. Show me that you actually care. Show me that you appreciate the work I'm delivering in the office. And how do you show me in the office? Give me a promotion. Give me a raise. Give me a pat on the back occasionally, right? Whatever it might be. If we can learn ourselves and then manage to have the flexibility to understand that we are different, then we can get to the place where now we are saying, okay, I don't have to respond to Posa the way I respond to Shalom or Syria. Yeah. So there are filters within which our communication is received and within which we also communicate, or through which we communicate.
Okay, Sai, I don't know if you're back, but Njoki on Facebook has just commented on the storytelling, oral storytelling, and I just want to tie it with Liz's comment on the tone. So the way, okay, this is me in my thoughts, and if it becomes Louis, I just know it's me in my thoughts. They're part of a speech. There's a verb, adverb, whatever. Is there like a part of a conversation, like the tone, the inflection, and how someone reacts to it, and how we were taught that through oral storytelling, but we've lost it, and how we can bring it back so that people can tell the difference between the tones and everything. So, because you're sometimes in my mind, just start.
Funny enough, I don't think that bit is lost because Hollywood does it better than I was about to sing some of the songs Grandma used to sing to us, could do it. The only difference is, of course, when Grandma told us the stories about wolves or dogs and what have you, as a child, we were very, because we were told those stories, when we were children, literally, our minds were they created the image. So as far as being able to tell the difference through inflection of voice and change of face and stuff, that is, I don't think that's where the problem lies. I honestly don't think, because our teachers in school, you do know there's a certain voice they put and you're in trouble. And there's a certain tone they use and it's okay. Our African preachers on the average are very good at, inflecting if their liturgy is okay. So I don't think that we have many other problems, but the African, at least, capability to tell stories, and even still in the Western domain, where the storytelling has been delegated to movie stars and stuff, technology is able to tell a story way more grippingly and stuff. Where the problem is that we are more distracted. So we are not doing good listening. So the problem is not in the storytelling and our ability to interpret it, but the problem is our ability to hold attention and our ability to listen is where the things begin to crumble. So we are good screen readers, but we do not know how to read the screen of human emotion and human thought. We struggle giving people one of the best gifts, which is the gift of presence. Being there and being truly there, listening in for what is said and for what is not said. That for me is the skill set that I think a proper application of EQ and the whole emotional intelligence domain should help individuals do. Listening to the spoken, listen to the unspoken. But as far as listening to tone and everything from storytelling, Hollywood will mop the floor with my grandma's stories. And you can see it now. Peppa Pig is is way more addictive to the kids, and Baby Shark is doing way more than our auntie stories could do to us. So just my thoughts on the same.
But then you're behind in cartoon world. I think Peppa Pig was taken over by something. There's a new dog. I can't remember. Yeah,
I'm not babysitting at the moment.
And Baby Shark is 5 years ago. So that brings to the what is it called? Body language. I don't know. I know sometimes I have to tell my children that that's when they're having, for lack of a better word, a resting bitch face, that you can't do that face with that person. How do we tie in the cultural nuances, body language and tone? How do we teach it? I know we here have it, but how are we teaching it to the people, to our children and to the adults? So, okay,
Can I go first on that? Yes, because I'm on the screen. Those ones are surprisingly the best answer comes from me is a Bible verse. It's the principle taught in Deuteronomy 6. These things you will teach to your children diligently when you sit, when you rise, when you walk. It's a mixture of those two things. One, it's intentionally teaching, like the way you say, like, in this space, placing your hand a certain way, looking a certain thing communicates. Some of those things are taught, but then a lot of it is also caught. There's a lot to be said about the teaching adults right now to be present in and to do all their communication well. But there's a lot more that also needs to be done in just allowing children to be around you because they will catch. A lot of the things need to be caught. And I know this will be a tangential thing. It's very more important in my experience for boys. We learn a lot more. Placing boys, for instance, around men helps them to learn how to communicate properly and helps them to know how to interact back and forth. So the same cultural, making children culturally competent in different cultures is going to be a mix between teaching and allowing them to be around and so that it's caught. And then there's going to be incidences of loving correction because there's a lot of stuff that one culture may do or because of their perception of another culture that is actually wrong. Like there are references or there are sounds and faces. And so correction needs to be done to say like, hey, you don't do that to those individuals because this is what it communicates. You don't call them those names because this is what it means. It's kind of just like in the rap world, a white individual is allowed to rap along a song, but they're taught, from the get-go, like where there's the N-word, you bleep. As a white person, you don't say the N-word. Yet a black guy can say the N-word. It's so embedded in it, but it is more taught, and then part of it is also caught and and you become more culturally competent through such opportunities. Then I think finally for me on that point would be, I don't think enough has been said about the need for younger people to be placed in spaces where they are with older people and they can begin getting the comfort of interacting with each other. Part of the challenge we're having with the whole wider communication problem, and more specifically for the whole subcultural nuance, is because who are children hanging out with? Largely it's with themselves and their peers, whether it's digitally or otherwise. And it's therefore no wonder that we are shocked they don't know some of these things. So we need more spaces where they are able to interact. One of the problems that happened to us historically is where when adults came, kids were summarily chased away and told them, in Swahili, watu wakubwa wako hapa. So kids were always lumped with each other. There's room for that because maybe some of the conversations that need to happen are more adult and nuanced, but then there also needs to be an intentional time where even in the presence of adults, children need to be together. And especially when the interactions between adults are with people from different communities. That way they're given more opportunity to catch on stuff rather than just being taught.
Shalom and Syria, same train of thought. Of course I lost the train of thought, but yeah, somewhere there. Do you have any? We're gonna do ADHD in May.
Your chains of thoughts go interesting places. The train stops at many stations.
Yeah.
But if I can pick up something that Sai is saying about getting into spaces where children, teens, young adults, and adults can actually interact, I think in the home space, opportunities are coming up through games. I have noticed there's lots and lots of conversational games that are coming up. We don't have too many of them locally, but they're there. There was a question one I remember. Uliza 2, I think, yes. I think there's a company called Uliza 2 that's having card games that basically build conversations. There's lots of those that are coming up from US, UK, etc. So I think as a global society as a whole, we are seeing the breaks and trying to see how we can correct them to bring this interaction, the family. We have heard of Cards Against Humanity and things like that. Problem is, much as that is working out very well, and I buy many of those games, problem is the themes are very adult in nature or very liberal, if I may put it that way. So if we are going to get places where adults and children can sit together, talk, converse, get to know each other, and catch life, then we're going to need to create some of those things ourselves. Again, what I'm doing is just throwing the challenge out there. If this thing has become if this thing has deteriorated this much, why don't we get to a place where then we can create these solutions in line with whatever is available at the moment? Because that's what's there. The cartoon I think you were talking about is Bluey. Was it about the dog?
Yes.
Yeah. I babysat an American kid. What do you call the shopping thing is? I don't want to give the name. Do you call them shopping carts or do you call them trolleys?
Because I call them both, I need to ask the child here. Wait, it's a cart, and you have to say the cart.
Not the cat meow.
Not cat meow and not cat.
The shopping cart.
It's a cart. The R has to be pronounced, yeah.
Then I think Bluey calls it trolley.
Oh, okay.
So you see that whole American British English.
Mm-hmm.
We realize that kid does not talk. She basically spends so much time watching Bluey that she talks like Bluey.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just the accent that has changed, it's the vocabulary too. So if we create things that are going to help us spend time with the children, then they will catch our accents, they will catch our vocabulary, and then they will catch our facial expressions, they will catch everything. As long as we're going to leave them with emojis, The same emoji for I've lost my shoe is going to be the same emoji you use for I've lost my parent, without actually seeing that the facial expression can change. So let's create the games, let's create the opportunities for interaction. Back, I think, to what we were saying at the beginning, put the gadgets aside and be present enough to do things so that they can catch this stuff. Yeah. So there are opportunities that we can create.
And I think the same accent thing was Peppa Pig made very many Kenyan kids, my children's age, get a British accent, also American kids. And talking about games, but in the US, but it's a big thing. The most homes have games like from chess, everything. The kids who used to hang out with my children know how to play kati, and they call it kari. You know, I rolled my eyes. And then they also play, what's it, poker? What was that game? Poker? We call it cardi. They're like, can we play cardi? So it's a thing you can, you teach them how to, conflict resolution, and just being present, and you learn what they're doing in school, who's beefing with who, when you just play those games and they're present. But then if you take time, I think the take-home message for today for me would be just be present. If you're present, you influence your children and your children's friends. I mean, these conversations we are having is a result of because it started out as a mentorship for my children and their friends and their mothers, and it's morphed into what we have today. Syria, you're on my screen. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I like what I'm hearing. And then, I've just noticed that before the worry was not our children, our young toddlers picking up the accent of the cartoons, but picking up the accent of your house manager. It's interesting how that has evolved into the TV because, or your screens or the gadgets that your kids play around with. I have a friend whose daughter sounds like an American because that's what she watches all the time. So her mom is having to adapt to her speaking vis-a-vis her daughter speaking like her. So it's really important what we allow our kids to watch and what they engage with and who they engage with. So that being present, I totally agree with. But to take us back to body language, I think it's so critical because I can read your bodily expressions better than I can decipher what it is you're trying to say. So I always tell my son, you're either not being honest or what is that reaction now? You're not happy because I can read it off his body language. And in studying and teaching communication, it is the biggest percentage of what you communicate because we communicate all the time. We communicate based off of how we dress, how we react, our facial expression, how you show up somewhere communicates something. So for instance, you've gone to an office meeting and you've gone dressed in your sports attire, you're communicating something. So it's really important to factor in body language to teach people about body language, or at least make them aware if you're not going to teach them. Because as we say, our mothers always used to know, and you wonder, hey, can you have eyes at the back of your head? Because they will know when you're lying. They will know when something happened and she shouldn't be knowing, or when siblings are hiding things for each other. It's, I don't know if it's motherly instinct, but the way we are built as humans is really being distorted. And so it's important for us to go back and reclaim what we are supposed to be. And that's taking time to listen to ourselves, to listen to our bodies, to listen to things longer than TikTok. I can tell you a big, big factor in how we communicate and the ability to communicate has been split into small portions of I cannot concentrate for longer than 3 minutes. Because, for example, now TikTok is only now that they've allowed a 10-minute video to be done. And I find it interesting that I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you've heard of this lady who has done a 50-part series on who, did I marry? And it's blown up. People have actually taken time to stop and listen. And if you listen to her, she is so detailed, she talks slowly, but people have listened. So the question is, we've not lost the capacity to be able to listen for longer than that 3 minutes is because we don't practice it. So in pausing and taking time to read, watch something that will help us learn, to sit and talk to each other for longer than 3 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes is a function of practice. So that being present around your kids and your family, giving people time, because we seem to be so busy, but when I want to, I will find the time to come look for you. So it's not that I'm too busy, it's priority. So who you give priority to have these conversations with will have your time, will have your concentration. So I think it's a function of practice, intention, and just being present when we do have these conversations, when we make time to play those games. I remember, as you say, Kadi, Kati, there was Shake, there was Monopoly. I remember sitting as a child growing up playing Monopoly and Snakes and Ladders with your folks. It gives you a space to enjoy each other's company, to talk to each other, to have conversations. And on the days when Stima would put and you have to talk to each other. These days, what do? Does my phone have charge? Right? So that you can continue doing something. Do I have data? Why not talk to each other and tell each other stories when the power goes out? So I think for me, it would be just, it is a function of intention, an intention to connect with people, to give time to the conversations and the relationships you want to build, and being present when you do have those conversations. We can't be going on dates with our phones and we don't know what to say. So let's teach our children the right way to do this, and hopefully we can change the world one person at a time, one child at a time.
Okay. Let's go back to what I put on the message that accompanies the flyer. I know wars have been started by bad talks, bad conversations, but what situation kwa ground in the professional and the personal space, because both of you straddle these worlds, what are you seeing? And we can do it in the Mambo Matatu format until our president gives us a new funky word, apart from kutenga na what have you seen as is a direct result of poor communication or communication breakdown in both our personal, in the personal spaces and in the professional spaces? I know we touched on it at the beginning, but just ndio watu wajue kuna shida. And Saya, you can start, as I see these nice 844 children are writing notes.
I think the one is it contributes, it's not the only contributor, but it contributes to what we're experiencing as extended adolescence. There's a problem where people are not getting out of adolescence soon enough. And for some people, it's persisting all the way to their 40s. And poor communication is, again, not the only contributor, but is a strong contributor to this, because individuals are not learning to express their emotions or their feelings or their needs, and they instead act them out or leave them out, like what you'd expect with an adolescence. Secondly is, for those who desire to go the way of marriage, it is making individuals stay single unnecessarily longer, and delaying and kicking down the journey into marriage longer than it needs to be. And down the road, there's going to be consequence, because the later you get married, there's going to be issues about children and when you become financially stable, and all of that comes with it. And for the simple reason, there are quite a number of individuals who, again, would rather act out on their feelings. One of the other two panelists talked about people becoming sexually active with individuals they are not even able and willing to communicate. To use more pastoral language, is they are doing with their bodies that which they are not able to commit to do with their whole life. Okay, so sex becomes a quick and easy outlet for individuals either unwilling or unable to communicate, which is an integral piece for the commitment that makes true marriage successful and long-lasting. And so the end result is individuals either are relating very casually or failing or delaying to commit, or altogether just shying away from the entire spectrum of dating and forming marriage, because it's a deal, it's a contract formed through conversation. Thirdly, is one result I see in the challenge around communication for me is directly with men, because I do a lot more work nowadays with men, is and the modern man, especially the young man, is confronted with many challenges. One is they're being raised either with fathers who are raised up being told you're here to be seen and not to be heard, and their grandfathers were not models to their fathers about what proper communication needs to be. So the young upcoming man has very many doubts and very many insecurities about who they are, and they go out and, again, being unable to communicate those insecurities, fears, desires, hopes, they either act them out through truancy or the school dropout that you see that is higher in boys than it is in girls now, or the inability to just follow things through, or what we loosely lump together in just the failure to being a man. And that has a lot to do with them, because they're not able to communicate, they're not able to ask for help, they're not able to ask for assistance. And imagine this is coming at a time when they're being bombarded by all the wrong signals. Also, besides that, there's a lot more to be said to the modern young man's inability to communicate and single motherhood. A lot of upcoming men are being raised by girls, and there's just the side of being a man that this may sound sexist, but a woman cannot, the things a woman cannot be able to transmit as effectively into a young boy's life as a man would. And there are pieces of communication. My wife keeps seeing how I interact with my boys, with, the boys in my life. And they're like, man, you guys communicate very differently. Yet for us, it's complete, it's adequate communication. There is genuinely something called a boy code. There's a way Deno and I would interact and relate and communicate on a thing that I couldn't do with my sister or my mother or my wife. So I think on a lot more specifically on the effects on men is profound for me. They're walking around, the failure to communicate and the failure being given the tools to communicate is making many men walk around in need of help but unable to know how to ask for that help. And the end result is they either retreat from life, from society, or they begin acting out on their fears by throwing money at it, or sleeping around, or drinking their way into an early grave. And then finally, for me, from the religious circle, is the inability to communicate properly is hindering, is having an unholy trinity within communities of faith, which is the inability for the clergy to communicate effectively the gospel and its claims to the laity, like the pastor, unable to communicate, come through and come and, and get through. It's one thing to stand on that and give your delivery for 30 minutes, but it's a totally different thing to communicate. If the congregation sitting in your presence are individuals either distracted or are inept at listening or inept in voicing back what they truly need, you could preach until you turn blue or black and you're still not able to come through. And then secondly is the ability of the church or communities of faith to communicate with their communities, the communities that domicile them, is really heavily hampered by just this entire failure to communicate. because we don't know how to listen remember that church is an animal of its culture. It's we don't extract people from different cultures and bring them into a church. We're an animal of our culture. And because the culture is struggling with communication, it means the church is also struggling to communicate with its community and therefore unable to fulfill what would be normal social mandates that communities of faith should be able to effectively deliver. And the end result is we end up creating programs that really no one has asked for or that are ill thought through, that they're not effectively addressing what the true need is. It's like playing the guessing game. When a child is crying, are they hot? Have they soiled themselves? Are they hungry? Are they sick? Is it a fever? Because a child doesn't know how to communicate, the mother has to go through, or the caregiver has to go through a whole set of guessing game to nail what the problem is. Similarly, when communities of faith are operating in modern times and with the whole challenge of communicating is when you see crime or delinquency or divorce or whichever other D going up, because we are unable to communicate well, we begin playing a similar guessing game. So at times what ends up happening is nothing more than, it almost feels like all that has just been done is painting the problem a new color. But if communication had been better, we should be able to tailor the correct solutions to the people. A piece of that is the congregants themselves are unable to communicate to their leaders effectively. And the end result is a lot of festering problems continue. Things like domestic violence or things like individuals feeling disconnected from God and from community and from themselves keep festering. And all of this, when you track them back down, is a direct result or consequence of a failure in communication.
Okay, two corner points here. The conversation we're going to have on divorce, right? Okay, Sylvia and Shalom, from your point of view, what as in the failure in communication breakdown, what are the results you're seeing in the personal and professional spaces?
I think Saya has summarized them quite well, because I don't know if I could start from the younger generation. And I think this is actually cutting across all generations, not just the younger ones. Because of that misunderstanding, miscommunication, and lack of communication, there's a lot of isolation and withdrawal. Because of just this feeling of, nobody understands me, or they won't understand what I'm going through. The world has become so individualistic that if I'm going through any trouble as an individual in my relationships, I may feel I do not want to share with other people. So I end up isolating myself or withdrawing. So we have a lot of people living lonely and alone lives because they don't know whether they can actually tell anyone what's going on. And I think that is connected with the mistrust. For whatever reason, we have ended up getting to a place where we actually do not trust each other enough to open up. And therefore we kufa with, you just die with whatever it is that you are struggling with. And that's related to, I think, a question that Kendi had asked on the chat that says, for me, I struggle in figuring out if there's a hidden message in the conversation. When you don't know how to read somebody, you have to do that guessing game that Sai is talking about. What do they mean? If their eye does this, if their mouth does this, if their skin folds a little bit, forehead crunches a little bit, what do they mean? So we are guessing more than listening and guessing more than understanding. And so that's connected to the assumptions that we end up making about each other. Cross-generationally, what I have seen on the ground is grown-ups assuming that a teenager is just being a teenager and being hormonal, right? Or making excuses like, that woman is just on her period, or she's just menopausal. We end up labeling things because we don't want to talk about the issue, or we don't know how to talk about the issue. We blame it on a stage in life, or we blame it on something that we are seeing. So there's lots of assumptions that I think I'm seeing people making. And then, of course, there's the divorce and separation, which we'll talk about deeper another time. But as a result of not communicating, you don't resolve problems, and therefore the easier thing becomes, let's part. So there's a lot of breakdown in relationships as a result of this on the ground. Yeah.
Syria?
Now that you guys have said everything, but my thoughts, I think, and I'll start with where Shalom has concluded in terms of a breakdown in relationships. I think there is a huge breakdown in how we relate with each other. And it's not just romantic relationships, but parent to children relationships, colleagues relationships, relationships in churches, I think all types of relationships. I mean, that is so wide. But for me, the biggest thing is there's a breakdown in relationships, authenticity, trust, in terms of just how do we engage? How do I believe what you're saying? How can I trust that what you're telling me is true? Is there a hidden agenda in what you're telling me? And then, of course, we choose to use digital means to engage. I'll tell you, as somebody that really triggers me, and not just in the what that he said, but in the how. And so it's become a function of having to choose not to react, not to be, for them to gaslight me. And I think if we did a lot of just soul searching to be able to know ourselves, to be able to know, what word can I use? To be able to sieve what it is that we react to is really important in trying to build back these relationships. So I think for me, the biggest thing that I'm seeing hindered by communication is a breakdown in all sorts of relationships. Number two, the rate of depression, I think, has gone really far. And here I'm speaking for the boy child. A couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine passed away. And I saw it online and I was shocked because, yes, I haven't spoken to him for a long time. But you know, the people you think this is the last person who would not be able to communicate and say, I'm struggling with this or I'm struggling with the other. So that inability of men, by function of how they have been raised, you have to be tough and you can't express your emotion and blah, 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 blah. That is really causing men to think, I can't do this anymore. I've had enough, or I'm not enough, or I have no one to speak to. Or just being able to authentically say, I'm struggling is huge. And if we don't check it, we'll really, really lose people. So the thing is, we say it, now we are saying it, that, oh, men, talk, 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 but what are we doing about it, right? There's so much you can do to tell a man, go see a therapist, right? There's a connotation about, I'm going to see someone. For a man, rather than a lady saying, I'm going to see a therapist. So that, I think, is a big effect in terms of, I can't even tell my mom or my sister or my brother or a friend what I'm going through. And so I've been deliberate with my son. And as Saya said, there's something about a mother being able to communicate and teach certain things to a son. Because sometimes what I do, because the father is not present, is I will be deliberate and tell my brother or my friends, please, I need you to have a conversation with my son about ABCD. And let me tell you, the outcome is very different. So after they have that conversation, then my son will come to me and say, yeah, I understood this. So some things I'm not able to impart to him, but a man will, because they've been there. They know what the child is going through. They know how the men think, and they're able to communicate it very differently from the way that I would. And the third thing I think I notice is, and as somebody has said, the relationship with our politicians. So leadership is really being affected by communication. Case in point, case study, Kenya. For those who live in this country, the things we see and the things we hear, it's just a function of shaking my head. There's a real gap. And it's not that people are not hungry for true leadership. They are. We know and we can identify and we can feel when a leader is being authentic, when they are communicating in a way that you will believe them, that you will trust them. People are hungry for that, and they can tell when you're being genuine. But then the question is, are you really being genuine, or are you so good at being the charismatic self that you can be to tell all these lies and people will still believe you? But that's on the political side. But when you look at even corporate leaders, you look at leaders in different spaces, there's a gap in that authenticity. There's a gap in the ability to communicate in a way that influences, that motivates people to move, to do, to grow. And it's not that we cannot build it, we can, but it's about intentionality and the ability to just take certain steps to really go back to the roots, go back to looking at, so what is real leadership, right? And that's an area that really needs to be worked on. I know there's several schools of thought, there's several schools and universities who do leadership courses that are different. So I'll give an example of the Africa Leadership University in Africa. They have a completely different program from what you'll find in a regular university in terms of how they build the leaders of the future. And the impact is there because you're able to identify someone who has come out of the Africa Leadership University. Yes, there are the pros and cons, and those who are there will know, but then you can see a distinct difference in those who go through that system. And then lastly, for me, I think, and this is both from a personal view and from the strengths coaching that I do, is that, my goodness, we are so different. For you to find somebody who is exactly like you, the people in the world have not even been born enough for you to find somebody who is identical, right? And so we have forgotten, or we don't know, and we're never told that my point of view and how I am wired is very different from the people you're born with, the people you marry, the people you engage with or get into relationships with. A huge function of conflict is that we see things differently, but we don't pause to understand people's point of view. We get into conflict, we get into judging, we get into being ready to attack and say what we have to say without stopping to think, oh my goodness, this person's point of view is completely different from mine because my wiring is different. So my peripheral view and my view of the horizon can be trees or the ocean, and the other person is a white wall, yet we're in the same room. So us stopping and pausing to think, let me listen to this person, let me listen to their point of view, causes a lot of conflict. And this is something that in how we communicate, in how we listen, because listening, as we said earlier, is a key function of communication, is not listening to respond, but listening to try and understand people, because we are all different, we all think differently, we're all wired differently. As our mothers say, you are fearfully and wonderfully and uniquely made. It is true. So the moment we pause and start to see things from other people's point of view, then things will begin to be different. And I like what Shalom says. She's a beneficiary of ALU. There's a difference there. Back to you, Posa.
Okay. The people within the Zoom, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand and we will allow you to speak. The people on Facebook, you can type your question. Shout out to Florence, shout out to Njoki. I see you, and your comments, you can type them out. Otherwise, we need to eat. You know me, I have to finish with we need to eat. In closing, if there's no one with a question, in closing, and we can go down, Syria, because you're on my screen. What's your take-home message? This is what I told my statistics teacher the whole when I was doing my master's, like, what's the take-home? Because statistics are so annoying. What is the take-home? What do you want us to know about communication? Mambo matatu. We still do mambo matatu.
My mambo matatu is, the first one is what I finished with. Keep in mind that you are different from everybody you connect with. So their experience with you, the impact that you create when you connect with anyone, is impact that you want to think about. And I'll give an example. How you engage with the watchman in the place that you work. If you met them somewhere where you needed a door opened into a CEO's office, will they tell you he's not there, or will they tell you, come at this time, they'll be there? It determines the impact that you had on that person when you interacted with them, how you communicated with them. Did you get to know their name? Did you get to know even how many kids, or if they're married? So point number one, we are all so different. Think about the impact that you create every time you connect with every individual and how you communicate to them. What message are you passing? Number two is, what will my number two be? Everything we do is communication. So how you show up, how you present yourself, how you brand yourself is something to be intentional about. Not just in, oh, my pronunciation, I'm a Toastmaster, or I'm this, or I'm the other, or I'm a great public speaker, or I'm a motivator, or I'm an influencer. But everything we do is communication, from body language, from being able to express ourselves or the inability to. So what are you doing about the fact that everything that we do is communication? Even choosing to not communicate, you're communicating something. Not having the time to engage with people, to be present when you are in conversation with people, all of that is communication. So I think a big portion of, in fact, life is communication, because you will have to engage with people, whether you're in school, whether it's your family, whether you're at work, at church, in the bus, wherever you are communicating. So everything that we do is communication. And then lastly, my third mambo matatu, as I told you guys, my last name, my middle name is Tatu. So the last thing is real communication is what is received, not what you intended. So let's keep that in mind. Real communication is what the receiver has decoded. It is not what you have communicated. So it's really up to us to even ask, have you understood? What have you understood? So that I am sure that really I have communicated and the message has been received as it is intended, right? So we hear our own things. We have a lot of noise in our head and a lot of things happening emotionally and mentally. And so really, we need to be present, intentional, and keep confirming whether what you have communicated is what has been received. Over to you, Posa. Or I don't know who's going next.
Shalom. I think we already have a new, someone who will be taking our minutes, and that's Jackie.
I totally agree. I'm loving the summaries that are going there. In fact, it saves me from writing notes, you know. Wow, my mambo matatu. This has been an interesting space in terms of communicating and just looking at the impact it has across generations. So I think I will speak about pain, because we had talked about triggers, I think, at the beginning. If you spot your pain, whenever you're having an issue with communication, if you spot your pain, you'll be able to follow that through and find your preference. So if I feel pain when I'm ignored, I think you had talked about being unheard or unacknowledged in the flyer or the communication. For those who feel they are ignored and they feel bad when they're ignored, then they need to have a talking kind of relationship. The IT guy, our IT guy who didn't need to talk much, if you don't talk to him, he won't be worried. He's okay, he's comfortable. But then if you don't talk to a communicator like Syria or a marketer or, Posa, when I don't communicate to you, you will get affected by that. So I think to grow our own communication and to understand ourselves, we could also start by what causes us pain. And then like work backwards and then know what it is that we can improve. Because things like absence, you may cause me pain by not being there. So I keep saying, oh, I'd like you to be here. I'd like you to be present. That's because your absence is hurting me, right? Then I'd know, I probably like being with somebody, seeing someone. So for me, long distance relationship would work. So if you actually are looking at the place where you're feeling pain, I think you will be able to tell the kind of person that you are as far as communication is concerned. Because again, we said we are different. Then the second thing would be like the solution will be across generations. I think we spoke about that a little earlier when you were asking how then do we solve this problem? We're not going to solve it by teaching it in school only. We're going to solve it by working on it right across generations. And for me, what this looks like is that even that generation that is not even online with us because they are very, very analog, meaning our parents and grandparents, we who know better can actually go and start teaching them better, if that makes sense. Go and start doing that Toastmaster thing to them. I have learned something new. This is the way I'd like you to communicate with me. We start setting boundaries, so we can correct this thing across generations, whether the generation is exposed or not, all the way to the children who are watching Bluey. What will this do? It will help heal because some of us and those older than us have been hurt by this miscommunication. It will help stem the problem so that whatever is happening stops, and then it will prevent. For those who haven't started being hurt by this miscommunication, we can stop the problem from happening if we work across generations. Then the third thing, of course, is something that's dear to my heart, which is playing games and things like that. I think external activities can help build internal skill. If you're doing things on the outside, you can then be able to build what's on the inside better. So to understand yourselves more, also do external stuff. Let's play together before I can learn how to talk to you. Then the language and the communication will build as we grow. Thank you.
Hey, Japuonj Jackie. Hey, you can tell she's a teacher. She's doing a very good job summarizing this thing.
And
This
the
is what I'm
mean
supposed
typist.
I'm telling you. Hey, okay. Saya tufungie kituo. Our next conversation is on father. Syria, it's fatherhood. Shalom, you rest. I've been hanging out with the two of you since we started this year. I feel like, hey, okay, but next week is Shalom. And no, not next week. In 2 weeks, you rest, but you come back on the 24th. And then after that, you can rest until I drag you in again. Anyway, Saya, mambo matatu alafu tufungie kituo.
So 3 things. One is for communication to work, we need to do the 3 things. One is amplify the signal. 2 is cancel out the noise. And 3 is create the environment. So those are my 3 takeaways. And the metaphor just comes from thinking of a studio. I did work in a studio, and you can imagine when you walk into a studio, there's equipment, okay? There's equipment that is there, and we are always fine-tuning and trying to balance it. And one of the key pieces of equipment is to make sure we can amplify whichever input we want in or output we want out. And then we pad the walls so that we can cancel out any noise that would be coming either from bouncing back and stuff like that. And then thirdly is we put signs everywhere around the studio saying, hey, silence, recording in progress. That's how I'm thinking about. So to make adults and the next generation communicate better, we'll need to invest in those 3 things. One is make sure we get ways to amplify the signal. And that is creating spaces where the ability to have people both heard, listened to, and seen simultaneously is possible. I think communication does not happen effectively when those three things are not there. When you're not heard, listened to, and seen, because you can get the sense somebody is listening to you, but they're not seeing you, they're not connecting to the why and the behind what you're doing. So what that would mean is simple things like, if you're a dad or a mom trying to model good communication, put that phone away, face the child or the adult or the date or the datee you're looking at, and that does already those things simultaneously. If you're the boss, call the person in, put every other distraction aside, and give them wholehearted attention. And when they say something good, something meaningful, find useful ways of amplifying it to other people. Like say, hey, I would like to recognize child X who raised issue Y, or I'd like to recognize employee X who brought up matter Y, or rather than just going online and saying men are this, women are this, just say like, put something positive about the others online, amplifying the right voices. And then 2 is canceling out the noise. A good and healthy exercise to do that is to tell people, I hear you saying this and I'm understanding it to mean this. It gives opportunity for an individual to fill in the gaps, and then secondly, to clarify where it's not clear. And it's very different from just jumping off and being able to make conclusions about what somebody's saying, why they mean it, and making value propositions and value judgments about who they are. So whether it's online or in a face-to-face conversation or with your child or the next generation, you need to be able to communicate and say, hey, I hear from the words you've said, this is what I hear you saying, and this is what it seems to mean to me. And it gives them then the chance to give clarity and, importantly, to reduce the noise that comes, because when we're sitting in a conversation, there's noise from our experience, there's noise from our culture, there's noise from the environment we are in. So let's create spaces and cultivate the habits that allow us to cancel out the noise. And then thirdly is create the environments that are good for communication. That includes some of the practical things I said, like putting away your phone and all distraction, but also it's just creating the psychological safety. If a man is having to walk into a conversation, for instance, and they have to justify their existence or prove that they are a man in it all, you are not having a communication, but you're having a warrior trying to fight their way through a jungle at that point. But if, for instance, some employee is coming to you and you tell them, okay, let's have this conversation, and please do notice that it'll not have an impact on your raise or your performance or your rating. You're creating an environment of both psychological and physical safety for effective communication. If we're able to do this from the building block of society, the family, and then through the institutions of society like work and church and schools, we should be able to do well. Finally, I think the key mandate we have in this time is, if we are able to create thinkers and not reflectors of thought, and if we're able to create individuals who can allow that the minds can engage and clash, but the fist and the tongue can remain still, we'll have done just well enough. Thanks for our time today. I hope we'll be made better communicators. I hope individuals will not just merely slide into DMs and say hi for an entire year, but they'll be able to gain the courage to state their intentions. I hope workers will be able to get into offices and request for raises or demand for better employment opportunities, courtesy of being this, but also help that we can be able to have individuals coming from opposite sides of the spectrum and begin interacting and listening to each other and seeing each other, not just merely talking at, to, or through each other. And importantly, because scientifically this world is designed, this world is clearly designed for sound. We have an atmosphere that allows for sound and for light to travel. I pray that we will be able to also make sure that we intentionally create the relationships that resonate to the same that are designed to able to enhance communication. We often say communication is to a relationship, whether marriage or work, what blood is to the body. And when it stops flowing, there's death that is going to occur. Thank you for our panelists for your time, and Jackie and Syria. Thank you for our moderator, Paul, for leading this. We appreciate your time. And thank you for everyone who made time to be here. From the recesses of our hearts, we want to say thank you. We appreciate. We do recognize that we've had to, for the security and convenience of this, to change the way the Zoom registration happens. But we want to assure you that that small inconvenience is designed for a better convenience. So next time, make sure you're here. 2 weeks from now, that should be on the weekend of the 17th, we will be holding a discussion about men, just being men. And I'd really hope that each one of us can be there and we'll be able to encourage the men in our lives to be present and to engage. Until then, keep signing up and following us up on our various social media handles. That's Instagram is one Sir Jackson. Facebook is Authentic Dialogues with Sir Jackson. And on YouTube, there are 2 channels, there's Sir Jackson and there's Authentic Dialogues. So until next time, thank you so much and peace to each one of you.